Welcome to Seat at the Table, where we believe technical skills get you in the room, but your soft skills and business acumen will earn you a seat. My name is Jerich Beason, and I am the host. We're seeking to have candid conversations with leaders across verticals, industries, and just diving into topics that will help prepare and equip cybersecurity leaders by extracting the hard-earned lessons from the years of experience each of our guests bring to the show. On today's show, we have something a little bit different. We have a treat for you. We brought in someone who specializes in executive communication. As a cybersecurity leader who is seeking to have influence and who is seeking to have an impact on their organization at an executive level, the ability to communicate is paramount. It's really hard to find a strong and successful leader who isn't a gifted communicator. Some are born with it, and others have to really work hard at it. And I'm in the latter bucket. It doesn't come naturally to me. It doesn't necessarily get easier over time, but I've done programs like Toastmasters. I've read books and I've practiced exercises and I've learned from people like Stephanie. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jerich. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm so appreciative of the work that you're doing in elevating CISOs around the world. Yes.
Yeah, we are equally excited to have you. Maybe you can share a little bit about your background with the audience so they can understand why we have you talking to us right now.
Sure. So I'm a leadership communication coach. I've been doing this 20 years. I began as a consultant to a consulting firm, to Arthur Andersen was my first project. And there I helped, and I know you know what happened to them, but when I was there, the whole mission was on helping them use their speaking skills to grow business. And that was a wonderful launching point in my career. And that ended up growing into serving a number of consulting firms. And now we work with emerging leaders and leaders in a variety of industries all around the world. The goal is to be a consistently compelling force. That's what we work on with people.
Yeah.
And my personal journey on this topic, I went to business school at Notre Dame. I studied marketing. I had a passion for theater. And that combination is a really interesting combination. Going back even further, I was raised by two attorneys. Both my mother and father went to law school. That's actually where they met. And my mother was a state debate winner in Texas. And she talked about that a lot. And she also still evaluates everything I do, every speaking engagement she sees on me. I get a full written up critique. But that kind of attention on speaking did help me tremendously in business school and everything. And I think if there's one thing that parents can put an eye on, it's how you talk. It's what you say, how you talk, and maybe even more important, how you think about your own communication. And that's an internal personal piece that, and sometimes people aren't even aware of how many limiting beliefs they have about their speaking skills. But that's step one in my mind, is working on how you think about your own voice, your own communication.
Well, once a mom, always a mom. If your mom is watching, hi, Mom. Thank you for being a supporter of Stephanie and our show. Something you didn't share that, you're being modest. Stephanie, her husband is a retired CISO. So she has a bit of a soft spot for our industry, which makes her the perfect guest to talk about this ever important topic, specifically within cyber. I've read books by Peter Drucker, John Maxwell, Tony Robbins, Stephen Covey, Carnegie, Seth Godin, and a bunch of other influencers, specifically in the area of business. And there's a lot that I've learned, but one thing that they all talk about in some aspect is communication. You cannot be a business leader that is successful at the highest levels if you can't communicate. I suggest all of you guys read their books as well. And these guys have been mentors to me. They don't know it, but their books have shaped in many ways my thought process and how I communicate and just how I lead in general. But one thing that their books haven't done for me on a consistent basis is give practical, applicable guidance that I can immediately put into action. So for this show, I want to do just that for the audience. Sound good, Stephanie?
Oh, I love it. Yeah. And I love all the people you mentioned too. I'm very familiar with them too.
All right, so let's see. Part of any leader's role is to make a pitch, specifically cybersecurity leaders. We're always making pitches for something. It could be a request for an investment in resources like funding or headcount, tools, even the resource of time. I need more time to make something happen. How would you suggest that a cyber exec approaches a communication of that nature?
Oh, okay. So this is a big one. Let's first begin with mindset, because mindset should always be number one when you're working on your communication. And what's really important for the CISO is to come in speaking like an executive, like aim to, doesn't matter if you are the CISO or the number two, is that you've got to think like an executive first, not like a CISO, not like the cyber expert. And I think that's the biggest shift that unlocks a world of difference in the communication. So one thing to do is study how the CEO talks, or the most effective speaker on the leadership team. And how does he or she do it? And how are they making pitches? Because it's different culturally in organizations on what's the most effective way to pitch. Sometimes it's a super assertive pitching style. In banking, a lot of banks, they want to hear like, what's the problem? What's the answer? And they want problem to be the first thing out of your mouth. Others are going to be more socialized in pitching. It's going to be a softer approach, more consultative. And then if you've got a very intuitive leadership team, options are a better way to begin with. We've got the problem. Here are all the options out there. Or there's going to be a motivational. Maybe you've got a culture where people want to see excitement and real raw enthusiasm or fear even on making the case for why this gets priority and budget. But the first sentence out of your mouth in a pitch is so important. The first sentence. So if you know that you need to go pitch budget on something to a large group, first go test it on your best friend in that room. Your best friend will give you some good advice. Don't let it be the first time that they're hearing about it. Let some of this seep around and socialize it a bit before you go to the big room. But in the big room, the first sentence has to almost feel like the audience is like, how did she read my mind? Yes. Like if the first sentence can have that appeal on the room, you've got a huge advantage. But if the first sentence is a shock and awe statement, that they're like, what? You've already created a little emotional resistance. So the first sentence needs to be, yeah, that's important. They've got to say, yes. The second sentence can be shock and awe. The second sentence can be the problem, something they didn't know, new information that's been revealed. And that difference between the, yes, I'm with her, oh no, oh no, that's new. Now we've got a hook and they're off balance and they're going to be so interested. Then you're get ready to deliver your main idea. And that main idea, this is where I think sometimes technologists or experts struggle, is they can't find that simple idea. And the simple idea, it should be, we need to invest in one thing that all the little things will fall under, but we need that simple statement, because the simpler it is, the easier it is to buy into, it's to align to. And so it could be something like, we need to invest in machines. We need to invest in changing this process, but something that's simple, concise, and digestible. Because these messages, we want them to be memorizable to audiences. You want that CMO in the room to leave and be able to quote you, to repeat you. And so repetition, purposeful repetition in messages is so beautiful. People are worried about being redundant. Like, well, we don't be circular and redundant, but good purposeful repetition is what makes you memorizable, makes you quotable to other people as well.
Wow. Okay, so you covered a lot there. So there are a couple things that you said that fly in the face of what I've done in the past. So I'm really interested in kind of hearing your approach here. I learned a lot from my time when I worked for the government, and a lot of people that work in the government come from the military space. And
Mhm,
there's a concept called bluff, bottom line, up front,
mhm.
and that's usually the main attention grabber. It gives really the message, and then the rest of your conversation is providing the details and the context around that message. And it sounds like you're saying that main idea should come further into the conversation and not right up front.
Not too far though. So let me demonstrate. So let's say my first sentence is, we want to ship product really fast. Everybody in my room is going to say, yes. Second sentence, we're not secure enough. Next part, what needs to happen? You do need a nice question in there, simple question. And I love the open palm. So, what needs to happen there? You can decide right there in that moment if you want to let your audience be a part of solving that, or if you want to go straight to the bottom line, which is we've got to invest in some security improvements.
Okay. So that does align more with what I was taught. And it sounds like you're using the consultative approach, which is situation, problem,
Yeah.
solution, and then reward. That's usually the way I structure any conversation, because before I go ask for something, I have to help them realize that there is a need. Right. If you know that there's a need before the ask, that ask sounds a lot more appealing and it's easier to digest. So let's go a little bit deeper in on this, because I think this is a really important topic. You brought up concise,
Mhm.
and I am a firm believer that long-windedness is the exact opposite of executive communication, because executives have short attention spans. So in this pitch, do you and I probably should have asked, is this purely for verbal communication, or would you structure an email the same way?
Same way. Same way. And you want to use the same terminology, the same, because if every message feels so different and new, the poor executive is like, oh, it's just more stressful. You want your audiences to be delighted every time they open an email, every time they hear you, like, oh, I just like the way he organizes this. I feel like I could teach this to others because it's so simple. And the written communication, there's some great tricks on bulleting and a simple 2-sentence paragraph at the top, a simple 2-sentence paragraph at the bottom, a really clear headline subject line that is consistent with what you would say verbally as well. But this concise part, Jerich, I tune out after 90 seconds.
Hmm.
So in that's something we practice all the time with people, is we just put a hand up, like it's been 90 seconds and you haven't let me talk. So nobody is bored when they are talking.
Mhm.
So we've got to let our audiences talk. And if we're doing all the talking, CISOs, they're not talking. So if you can have your 90-second statement in whatever message structure you're using, and then just be comfortable with silence and see what they ask, they'll tell you what they need. And you're speaking to such different levels of knowledge on your topic in the room. You've got to let them ask questions. And I think a lot of executives are afraid of questions. They want to manage the conversation, but we need to relax and be more confident in how we handle questions.
Yeah, I love that, and I completely agree with you. And I would go so far as to say all communications, even social media. So when I think about the way I write a LinkedIn post, and this is just me, the very first sentence is the most important thing, because people are on their phones and they only see 3 lines on LinkedIn, and they decide if they want to click on the read more. So if that first sentence or second sentence within, the first 3 lines that you have doesn't grab the attention, doesn't resonate, doesn't any of that, they will never see the rest of the post. They will never like it. They will never share it. They will never comment on it. And I take that same approach when I'm presenting to leaders, when I'm providing updates or whatever it may be, because you're right. They are with you in the beginning, And depending on how that first 30, 45 seconds goes, determines if they're going to start reading their emails while they're listening to you, determines if they're going to start checking their phone, or if they're going to start thinking about all the other things on their plate. So I love that advice that you gave.
Actually, Jerich, you just made me think of something though that I haven't mentioned, which is the most effective CISOs I've seen have big personalities. They are funny. They are relatable. They're unexpected. You don't know where they're going at times, and they brighten up the room. They absolutely brighten up the room, and people are like, "Oh, good, security's here." And so the people who are being so focused on, "Oh, I want to be concise, to the point, and direct," if you're only that, you're missing out on the element that makes it magic, which is how interesting can you personally be in that room.
I absolutely agree. Personality is important. And I don't want anyone that is listening or watching that thinks they have a dry personality that they can't be that person. A lot of personality comes from confidence, right? The more you know your subject matter, the longer you've been doing something, the more your personality is able to shine in any platform. Uh, the the part about being concise, it's overlooked or even probably avoided because it's really hard to do, right? It's easy to be long-winded and say something you want to say in 2 paragraphs. It's harder to take that 2 paragraphs down to 2 sentences. I remember there was a quote by, I think it was Mark Twain. He was telling somebody, he said, "I don't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one instead." Right?
Yes.
And it's true. Like any author, anybody that writes a book, it's easy to just start writing all the things that are in your head. But when they say, "Okay, this is 400 pages, I need you to make it 200 pages, but still as impactful and still get all the messages across," that's where the hard part about writing a book is. And I think it's the same with any other communication.
Mhm. So here's a trick for that is no more than 5 things. So no more than 5. And I'll do this for myself. What are the 5 key messages, 5 tips, 5 insights I've got to share? And then letting the rest happen. Because you don't have the luxury of time to prepare maybe as much as you'd like to for every meeting. So if you can at least push yourself to what are my 5? And then if they don't all get out, be patient with yourself. You can follow up with an email. But try and come up with, "Oh, here are the 10 things. I might never see this audience again. I've got to lay it all out." That's what I think the CISO thinks when they're going to the boardroom. They think, well, this is a once a year thing or twice a year moment. I have so much I have to share. And then they talk too fast. They share too many details. They don't allow for questions. So even just putting yourself in the shoes of your audience and saying, what do they really worry about? What do they want to know? Maybe even begin by asking, how familiar are you with what we're doing in security? To see what they say first and then react to that, and only that.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And you brought up the board, which reminds me of the fact that we aren't just asking for things. Sometimes we have to make updates, right? We just have to say, "Here's the status of X, Y, and Z." And for me, the one thing I've questioned from time to time is the efficacy of how I deliver updates.
Mhm.
Updates to a project, quarterly business reviews, update on an incident. There's many types of updates and there's many type of audiences. But I never want to just provide an update so the audience can hear what I have to say and then they go on about their day. I want an update that elicits a response. I want them to take action from those updates in many cases. What are the keys to communicating that will lead to action?
Ooh, I love the board update. So here I have some strong opinions about this, which are your slides are your slides. Whatever you send, those are the numbers you want them to know, the pretty pictures you want them to see. Go ahead and send that, but do not present that. Do not present that. When you get up there, don't even look at your slides. Don't even look at paper. Give an update that begins first with what is your big strategic goal, and make it a business goal, not a security goal. You can accentuate that with the security goal right after it, but make sure it's a business goal first. Then where are we today across that goal? Are we 50% there, 80% there, just beginning? Are we just a little baby in this? But we have the big objective where we are right now. And that should be a mixture of good and bad news. Don't be afraid of the bad. Otherwise, if it's just good news, I would wonder about that. It wouldn't be as credible. Then in the near term, what's the plan? And then what's the key to success? That should be the last thing you say. What is the key to success? And make that be something that is a shiny object you want to discuss with the board. And open up and let them ask you whatever they want on that topic.
So there are a couple of things that you said that I want to hone in on a little bit more. We talked about going into kind of current state and the update. Let's assume this isn't the very first update. Do you remind them what you told them last time, or do you assume that they already know?
Okay, so the past is so boring. Wait, I would assume, really, you just want to be in the future and in the present. Unless there's been a breach or something that you have to acknowledge, then I would say, yes, you've got to talk about the past lightly, but only as it relates to the current state. As soon as you get pulled into the past, it feels like, did we need this update? We're just rehashing the same thing. It gives the audience time to tune out. Let them ask. Say, well, now what, last time didn't you say this? Now you've been invited to talk about the past, and you can talk about the past. But this is true for all updates. Like, I wish, if there's one thing people could change, I wish they would stop saying, the last time we talked, I mentioned. It's like, that's so boring. So boring. And we should trust that they would have some memory. They have some memory. And they could have read what you put that in the read at home materials. But in the room, you're focusing forward.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. And another reason why that's important is, I guess I want your thoughts on this as well, is I usually tell my team, if you're going to prepare an update, let's say you have a 30-minute meeting, or let's say you have an hour, just for easier math, prepare to deliver that update in an hour, prepare to deliver it in 45 minutes, 30 minutes, or 15 minutes, because you never really know how much time you're going to have. And you may have to give one ad hoc outside of the structure of the meeting that you have. So what are your thoughts on the amount of time you use, or the amount of time you plan to allocate when you have a meeting where you're delivering an update?
I think it's rare to ever prepare. I mean, unless you've got something really unique, but 7 minutes max would be, I like 7, 5, and 3 minutes.
Okay.
We usually do. So 7 minutes if you've got to give a picture of the future, 5 minutes if it's a pitch for investment, 3 minutes or less if it's a status update or board update. But 753 is, I mean, there's so many different things. Do you need a 2-sentence elevator pitch? You can play around with so many increments, but 753, when we're training people on senior leader communication, is a nice, easy rule for the senior leader.
Okay.
Now, let's say you have a town hall and you are doing, you're coming up with your picture of the future. You distill it to 7 minutes. You can always stretch that time, and by having guest speakers come in and maybe a video, like time gets filled easily in calls. But if you can get yourself to your 7 minutes, that's just already, like you said with the Mark Twain quote, you should be proud of that. You got a big idea down to 7 minutes. Not many can do that.
You know what? I never thought about it in reverse. I always start off with the amount of time I'm allocated, and usually it's a 30-minute meeting, and then I just try to make it shorter. I never thought, let me start shorter and then find ways to expand and give context and additional detail if I have extra time. It's so simple, but profound at the same time. Okay. You talked about bad news, right? Make sure that you have bad news in there. One, so it's believable. People know that you're bringing the whole story and not just a part of the story that they want to hear. Is there a structure, right? The immediate thing that comes to my head is the sandwich approach, right? Good news, bad news, leave them with good news. So they hear good stuff in the beginning, they hear good stuff at the end. But that's usually for giving feedback, not necessarily for presenting an update. Is there a structured way to safely give bad news?
Okay, I think you will grow the most as a leader when you work on how you deliver bad news and you get comfortable with it, that it's just escalating an issue and it's part of the job. It's like, this is what I do. I escalate issues and I can do it comfortably, sensitively too. So if I have just learned that we've had a breach, I come to you, Jerich, I'm going to do something like this. And now I'm not imagining a board meeting for that. This is the moment. I come to you and I say, Jerich, I'm coming to you as soon as I found out. So you got to make the first sentence about, I did not sit on this. You're hearing this now. And then the second sentence should be, who else knows? Who else knows? Right now, it's just the team and that have this knowledge. And then share the bad news. But already those two statements have prepared the listener for, this is significant. We can manage this together. We can problem solve. And then the bad news, the justification of why that happened, what this means right now, what we're doing to work on this, why it won't happen again, if you know that yet. But that kind of structure to the message is super helpful for your listener. Now you might have to, if they're getting emotional, then you might have to say some of those things twice. And be prepared. That's okay. When people are emotional, they don't listen that well. And that's human.
Yeah. And that's where emotional intelligence comes in. And you have to be able to read when they're being emotional and then act accordingly. Okay. So this is really good. This has been really good so far. I thank you once again for coming on. As I think about the most impactful type of communication, it's when someone is laying out a vision. I strongly believe nothing is more inspirational, nothing is more energizing for an organization than for a leader with a clear and, more importantly, believable vision. That's kind of part of the reason why I think Martin Luther King is one of the most inspirational leaders I've ever researched. And I've researched a lot of leaders. I just named you some of those books. It's no easy feat to take an ambitious picture that's in your mind and convey it in a manner that is clear and use the term digestible to your audience. And I have to reiterate the term digestible, right? Because as a leader, you have to communicate something that is so grandiose, but at the same time, motivating others at the same time. How do you communicate something like that?
I think we should all hold Martin Luther King as our standard, because there's so much to study in his most famous message, I Have a Dream. And in those 90 seconds that we could almost all quote, he uses repetition, poetry, visual language, emotional language, but simple words that stick with us and that touch our heartstrings and make us want better, make us want to do something immediately. We're changed the first time we hear that message. We are changed. What if that's our goal in every meeting? Can I change and improve and make a difference and add value in every routine meeting with my words? Can I be impeccable with my words? Impeccable. That one of our coaches uses that phrase all the time, and I just love it. The goal of that, the standard of that. So for a vision, this is when a poetry, thinking more like a poet, like Martin Luther did, is so useful. Where can you use an analogy? Where can you use an example? More colorful words that they're not used to. Less jargon, no tech words. Like, take it all out so that anybody could understand this message. And with the desire of making it emotional for people. So the way you make it emotional is you make sure that there's some part of the message where you're saying, we're going to change the world. We're going to change society. Second is, this company is going to be better, so much better, different, stronger, almost unrecognizable after we achieve this vision. Teams are going to be so proud. Most importantly, our end users, our customers, the patients, and our that receive our services, whoever's receiving the benefit of your business, they are going to be better from us. And you individually are going to be so proud of what you've done. When you hit them on all of those angles of on the vision that you have, it is hard not to be emotional. And when you're emotional, that's when action happens. If you don't get your audience emotional, they will not do something different. If you just have them thinking, oh, that's an interesting number. Nice information you have, but I'm not emotional about it. It's not going to keep me up at night. I'm not going to pulse it around in my brain. Your goal as a senior leader is to get your audiences emotional. That does not mean you have to be a rah-rah type. I'm more of a rah-rah type. But you can be very cool and subdued and serious and still get people emotional just with your words, what you're saying.
Oh, man, that's so good. I'm not the rah-rah type. There are people listening that are not the rah-rah type. I am laid back and chill. I'm a Cali boy. That's just what you're going to get with me, right? But at the same time, I'd like to believe that there are times when I inspire and I motivate others, and I give them visions of what can be and what I'm anticipating will be. So for you to share that the type of demeanor you have, the type of personality you have doesn't limit your ability to articulate, and really impress upon your audience, a vision of yours. That's really important for people to hear. It's really part of inclusion. I think people think about inclusion as so many other things. Your personality type, it's also one of those diverse things about you. So thank you for saying that.
Sure. I wanted to say more about that because I've studied your communication, just even on our. I hope that doesn't make you feel valuable.
Nah, I love the feedback potentially if there is some.
I do study. It's hard to turn this off. So your style, I would type you as incredibly consultative in your vocal style. So you've got a soft, warm, like soft being like you're not yelling at us, and you create safety in your tone, which becomes part of your brand. So your vocal tone is saying stability and security, which is so perfect given your area of expertise.
I'll take it.
But the way you structure messages, you're very sharp and you are comfortable packing a punch with lots of interesting pieces. Like when you rattle off names of speakers or books, Peter Drucker, and you name those people, that's packing a punch and making a message really interesting and full for us, but you never overtalk. So that's intriguing. It keeps people wanting more and more and more. It's building trust so naturally with audiences. So something like we could say that there are 3 dominant styles that you see in leaders. They're either assertive, consultative, or motivational by foundation. Now, every leader needs all 3 styles in their toolkit, but you're consultative. So I would imagine it's very easy for you to make relationships cross-functionally in your organization. People feel comfortable telling you the bad stuff. They'll tell you like, oh, this isn't going well, because they feel so safe with you. So this style is really incredibly helpful and interesting to people. And even if you were giving a picture of the future, you don't need to use your motivational style. You can still have this consultative tone, but the substance of what you say can be incredibly motivational. And the contrast between a motivational content and a softer demeanor is really interesting to people and builds trust, I think, more effectively than if it's a motivational message with a motivational style. Like the contrast, like there's some interesting things people should think about in their own style. It's your level of intensity and how much contrast you've got in your style. We don't want to be plain vanilla speakers because then we'll just blend in. We've got to have some contrast. And contrast could be a very subdued style while you're delivering hard-hitting facts.
Yeah.
And that's interesting contrast. But intensity, how loud do you need to be? How big do you need to be in your gestures, or small do you want to be in your gestures? And how can you do a mixture of both so that people really don't ever find you predictable?
That was completely unexpected. Thank you for that. You brought so many other questions to my mind. This was going to be a little bit longer for anyone that's watching, because I want to finish on the vision, but I want to get back to what you talked about with the different communication styles, because everyone that's watching is wondering, which one am I? Right. So I'm going to get back to that in a second. When I think about vision, and I like that you agree with me on Martin Luther King, I love how you described it. I also study a lot of speakers. I mean, once again, I read and I study and I try to apply John F. Kennedy's vision for it's now a term that's used for anything major. It's called a moonshot, right? His vision was that we would land somebody on the moon and bring those people back safely. He did it in a 2,200 word speech. Nobody can remember any part of that speech, but they can clearly remember that vision. And we ended up doing it as well, right? Which is even greater. It was a reachable, realistic vision. But what you said earlier really resonates. You said it during the conversation around giving a request for resources, that it needs to be quotable. And I usually use the term portable, right? Whatever I'm saying, other people need to be able to understand it well enough to share it. It needs to have legs, and it needs to be concise and impactful enough that people naturally remember without trying to remember it. So what you're saying about vision is spot on with what I was thinking about it, and it aligns with a lot of the other people who set great visions, and they've actually come to pass. So thank you for that.
Well, you're so welcome. I do think those you should always be ready with your picture of the future message, because whenever you need to lift a room up to a higher level, and that could be morale wise or strategic vision wise, having that well crafted is so important. And something that the people you're mentioning do so well is they begin with the end. So that is a little bit like the bottom line up front, but it's, maybe it's, let's say we're a company that's trying to reach $1 billion, and we say, we will be $1 billion business, and we will do this, this, and this, and we're going to be all over the world. What we need to do to get there is we've got to expand the team. We've got to change our processes. We've got to invest in technology, and security is going to be a big piece of that. And so now I've got all the leaps that we need to take, and then acknowledge, like, if this were easy, we would have already done it. We haven't done it because of these limitations, but that's changing now. Here's the plan. And here are the promises I personally will make in this, and also what I expect of you. And that kind of formula for a picture of the future works really well. You can play around with it, but the picture of the future message, when it's really good, it's emotional. You're mentioning people by name who have helped in this process. You're recognizing people. You're making everyone feel successful, powerful, smart, seen, visible, and that we're going to do it together. But that picture of the future message is something that fits perfectly in a town hall or however big your team is. And that's something that's happening with the CISOs we've been talking to. Everybody seems to have a rapidly growing team right now, or they've just gone through some kind of consolidation and they have all new people coming in. And then the struggle is, how do I bounce up and down between speaking strategically, speaking operationally and technically? And how does that not stress out my brain doing all day long in meetings with different people? I think the CISO communication skills are a higher level than most other fields because of this special challenge. You've got growing members of teams. Every single person in the business needs to be able to talk security. So you've got this extra job of, I not only do the job, but I've now got to train everybody else to understand what we do. It's a big role.
It is. And, I'm a CISO, so it could be me thinking a little higher of my profession, but we have to be able to communicate to a board member that knows nothing about cybersecurity, all the way down to the person that just entered from college that also knows very little about cybersecurity, to the most talented technical engineer, because you lose credibility if you can't have some of those conversations. And the way you deliver the message, engineers are going to want a lot of detail. They're going to want you down in the weeds. Executives are going to want you higher level, and they're going to want you to get to the point and be clear and concise about it. So I do agree it's a challenge. That is specifically why we brought you on, to have the conversations that I don't think are being had in cybersecurity communities about how to communicate. We are a little over time typically, but I want to finish with, you brought up the 3 different types of communication styles that leaders have. My first question, I'll give you these 2 questions I have. My first question is, does everybody fall in those 3, or can someone find themselves not in any one of those, and should they aspire to be in one of those 3?
You can blend them. No, so everybody needs to have all 3 within them. Okay. And you decide in the moment, what do you want to show more of? Sometimes we find people who they really just don't know how to access their assertive side or motivational side. And then what we do is work on, how do you want to have an assertive style, and what's an assertive structure? And if you're using your assertive voice with an assertive message structure, it's pretty overpowering on your audience. So it's learning how to contrast those with each other. It makes you the more interesting speaker. And so that's, if people are wanting to work on this, first think about, how can I be more assertive in my message structure, in the words that I say? And then, what are assertive gestures I could use, or assertive voice that I could use? Yes. Like I would say, you have assertive message structure with a consultative voice. That's how I hear you. Your structure is very clear, so it comes across as assertive, but your tone is so consultative, which makes you really interesting to people. Jerich.
Oh man, I gotta go tell my wife this. I'm interesting. I'm consultative. Very interesting. Whenever you have a problem, that's why I'm always trying to solve them. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for coming on the show. I know that everyone listening and watching are going to be so much better because of it. I encourage all of you guys to look up Stephanie and go to her company's website. We as executives in cyber need to be able to communicate effectively, and hopefully this conversation will help you with that.
Thank you.